Once upon a time, there was a young girl who was loved by everyone who knew her. Her grandmother loved her best, and she fashioned for her a little red riding cloak with a hood. The cloak suited the young girl so much, everyone took to calling her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, her mother asked Little Red Riding Hood to visit her grandmother. Her mother said, "Your gran isn't very well, so take this cake and wine to her, and she'll feel much better for it. Now listen. Stay on the path, and when you get there, don't go nosing around in all the corners." Her mother gave her a basket with the cake and the wine, and Little Red Riding Hood set off. Her grandmother lived deep in the woods, and as she began walking among the great trees, a black wolf trotted up to her. But the wolf didn't snarl or try to eat her. Instead, he smiled and said, "Good morning, Little Red Riding Hood." Little Red Riding Hood didn't know the wickedness of the wolf, so she said, "Good morning, wolf." "Where are you going by yourself so early?" the wolf asked. Little Red Riding Hood said, "My granny's not well, so I'm taking her this cake and wine to make her feel better." "And where does your granny live, little one?" "Just along the path past the 3 old oaks, and then you'll see her house behind a thick hedge of hazel." As Little Red Riding Hood explained and pointed through the trees, the black wolf was thinking how tasty she would be, but if he was careful, he could also eat her granny. The wolf smiled with all his teeth and said, "I'm travelling that way too." So they walked together a little ways, until further down the path was a meadow of white flowers, carpeting the forest floor. "I think your granny would love those flowers," the wolf said. "They would look very pretty on that basket of yours." Little Red Riding Hood marvelled at the flowers like glowing fairies in the dark woods. She bent down to pick one, but then she saw a much bigger and more beautiful flower further off the path. She picked the flower, but then a little further was another beautiful flower, so she picked that one, and then another. With Little Red Riding Hood distracted, the black wolf ran straight to Granny's house and let himself in. "It's Little Red Riding Hood," the wolf said. Granny's voice came from inside. "I'm in bed. I'm feeling too frail to find my feet." So the wolf slunk through the house to Granny's bedroom. He leapt over to her and swallowed Granny down whole. He put on Granny's clothes and nightcap, pulled the curtain shut, and slipped into bed. It was about that time Little Red Riding Hood had collected a brilliant bouquet of flowers, and suddenly remembered who she was collecting them for. She put the flowers on the basket and got back on the path to Granny's. When she got there, the door was wide open, and the house was dark. "Granny?" Little Red Riding Hood said to the dark. A brave little girl she was, and she stepped into the house and edged her way to Granny's bedroom. There in the murk, she saw Granny's shape in the bed. As her eyes grew used to the dark, she saw on each side of Granny's nightcap 2 big ears. "Granny, what big ears you have!" "All the better to hear you with," came the voice. Her eyes grew a little more used to the dark, and she saw 2 big yellow eyes beneath Granny's nightcap. "Granny, what big eyes you have!" "All the better to see you with." Her eyes grew a little more used to the dark, and she saw 2 great big hands. "Granny, what big hands you have!" "All the better to hold you with." And then in the dark, Granny smiled and flashed a vicious set of fangs. "Granny, what terrible teeth you have!" "All the better to eat you with." The black wolf leapt from the bed and swallowed Little Red Riding Hood whole. He was full at last. He was so full, he felt very tired, and curled up on the bed and slept deep. Little did the black wolf know, there was a huntsman passing by, who had heard the noise coming from the house with the hazel hedge. He found the door open, so he entered the dark house, and there he found the black wolf sleeping in Granny's bed. "I've found you at last," he said. He raised his spear, but then he saw the shapes of the old woman and the little girl pressed against the inside of the black wolf's stomach. The huntsman rested his spear against the wall and found some scissors. He pinched the wolf's belly and snipped, snipped, snipped it open, until Little Red Riding Hood came tumbling out. "It was so dark in there," she said. She helped Granny out, who brushed herself off, and Red Riding Hood went to fetch some heavy stones. She brought them back in and filled the wolf's stomach with them, and then they stitched him up. The huntsman shook the wolf awake. The wolf had been having a strange dream, and was suddenly terrified to see not only Granny and Red Riding Hood, but a hunter with a flashing spear. The wolf jumped from the bed and out into the woods, but the stones were so heavy he didn't get very far, and slowly and surely the black wolf died. The huntsman got the wolf's prize pelt, and Granny ate the delicious cake and drank the wine. And Little Red Riding Hood thought, "If Mother tells me to stay on the path, that is exactly what I will do."